Hey guys, this is Caleb with DSLR Video Shooter, and today we're going to be looking at the Sony VG900. The VG900 is a fairly new camera. It's actually really the first full frame camera that is in kind of a camcorder form factor. What you get with the camera is the actual body and then the adapter. Sony has two mounts, the E mount and the A mount. The A mount is more their SLR pro photography line lenses. The E mount is their video mount. So if you actually take this adapter off, which the button is over here, you just have the actual E mount. What also comes with the camera is then the adapter, and that's what's going to allow you to switch between E mount lenses and A mount lenses. So it is based on the E mount system. The actual camera itself, when I first got it, I thought it looked a lot smaller than in the photos online. It is a very, very light camera body, which I think is nice because I could throw this on my monopod, and aside from the actual shape, it felt kind of like a DSLR, so it was much lighter in that regard. The other thing you're going to notice is that there aren't really that many buttons, so this is very different from something like an FS100 or FS700. So this is going to be more prosumer, less pro level. In the button department, I guess you could say. It does have a touchscreen, which I'm not as much a fan of, just because with the flip outs, I feel like those over time just begin to slowly go. I had another Sony HVR A1U several years ago, and that was the first thing to go, was the touchscreen. But there's a lot to like about this camera. A lot of people are saying, well, the price is so high, why don't you just go with an SLR or just move up to something like the FS100? And so I'm just gonna go ahead and go through a lot of the things that I found very useful, and then we'll jump into some of the cons. First off, it's full frame, but you actually can turn on an APS-C, which is more like a Super 35, just by a menu item in the camera, and you can turn that to auto too. So if you have something like a Tokina lens 11-16, which is built for APS-C sensor, you really want to use the 11mm on that lens, you can slap it on here, switch it over to APS-C, and you're good to go. So you essentially have two sensor sizes in the camera, which I think is brilliant. You know, if you're out somewhere and you feel like you need to reach out a little more, turn on APS-C and you're going to get a longer focal length out of your lenses. So that's a really, really cool feature, and that's something that I really liked. The overall, after using this for about a month, I really felt like it was a 5D in a legit camcorder form factor. So if you just take the 5D and remove some of the problems like not having to worry about 12-minute limit on your records, little things like being able to plug in an HDMI cable and have not only your on-camera monitor work, but also your external monitor, so you can have two monitors at once, clean HDMI out, and just the lens interchangeability. So it felt a lot like a 5D in a different form. The other thing that's neat about this camera is that the shutter speeds are made for video, whereas on the DSLRs we've been kind of cheating just a little bit using the 50th shutter speed as opposed to true 48, which gives you the real 180-degree shutter roll. And one of the neat things about this camera is that you can actually drop the shutter speed really, really low. On the Canon SLRs, I can't speak for the Nikon, but I know on the Canon you can only go down to 30, I believe it is, 30th of a second. On this camera, you can drop that much lower and get really, really interesting results. So that's kind of neat that we have, some more creative options with the shutter speed. Other things, audio is manual, being able to monitor it's very easy. The E mount is such a flexible mount. You really can adapt to anything. So I have right here as an example an adapter that goes from Canon EOS to E mount. So this is a Tokina 28 to 70, and this I can just go ahead and find my marks here. See if I can get this on. So that snaps on. I can take this whole adapter and lens off, line up the dots here, throw that on, and now I have a completely different lens on this camera. So you know, you really don't have to worry about adapting lenses. If you have a bunch of Canon electronic lenses, there are adapters out there that will let you be able to control the electronics of the lens. And a huge feature with this camera is 1080p 60 frames a second. On the Canon SLRs, we've been having to drop down to 720p and deal with other weird video artifacts, whereas this, you're going to get 60 frames a second, full 1080p, and that's a really nice feature. It was really interesting working with this camera after exclusively shooting with SLRs for so long. Things just worked. Stupid, dumb little things that we've had to put up with some of the DSLRs out there that we're using for video just aren't really an issue. And so it was a real pleasure to shoot with this. There were a couple things that I didn't like, and we'll go into those now. The first is the build quality of the actual body itself. While it's not going to fall to pieces in your hands, it's not pro level. So if you've been filming with the 5D or the 7D, you're just used to that weight, that really well built camera body, whereas when you switch to this, it feels a little cheaper. And you know, I know I've dropped my 7D and the thing is just a tank. It can handle all kinds of abuse. I really don't think this camera would be able to handle nearly as much. So that's something to consider, that you know, it's going to feel different. Definitely check it out for yourself though. If you're interested and you're not quite sure, go to a store and get your hands on one and see what you think. So that was, you know, one thing I noticed. The handle is kind of awkward. I don't know what it is with Sony and top handles, but they position it kind of right in the middle, so it's a little awkward, and I have fairly large hands, so that can be kind of weird. And there's an angle where the eyepiece moves, so it's kind of strange position, but it is nice to have one as opposed to not one at all. So the handle's a little interesting. There is an eyepiece on the camera, and it works pretty good. It's electronic. You know, it's going to be more of a, you know, you're really not going to get a great image out of it, but it works pretty good. It has a sensor automatically, so when you move your eye up to it, it switches on. And then the other thing I noticed was I really missed, when shooting with this, I really missed those dials. The two dials on the Canon cameras. There's only one on here for adjusting your exposure, and switching between adjusting the shutter speed, the gain or ISO, and then the iris was a little finicky. And it's got this tiny little dial. When you have the LCD open, you're kind of, you know, trying to work around that. So that was a little annoying. The other thing was just the lack of buttons. You know, when you're working with a higher quality video camera, you're used to having all the controls easily accessible. You're able to control most of the general features, but if you're going to need to do any kind of adjustment or change from you know, your frame rate or something like that, you're going to have to go into the menus and find it in there. So that can take some more time, which is kind of a pain if you're an event shooter, when you don't really have time to be messing with that. And then the other thing was just no XLR on this camera. We're kind of used to that, having coming from, you know, using DSLRs for video, but that's kind of a pain to just not have that built in. So I think a lot of these things, that's Sony saying, well, we have camera over here, the FS100 or the FS700, if you're going to want to go up to that kind of feature. So those are some of the things I didn't really like. Footage was beautiful. It really was a nice camera to work with, and I enjoyed not having to worry about a lot of the stuff that we're used to dealing with on DSLRs. So here's a test I did doing rolling shutter. This isn't scientific. This is just on a monopod downtown. And you can kind of see the results. This is on the full frame setting. So it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but it still definitely is an issue. When it comes to aliasing and moire, that is an issue on this camera. It's not as bad as the 70 in my opinion, but it's still something to, you know, that's going to be a slight problem depending on what you're shooting. Low light performed fairly well on this camera, and so now I'm going to show you some of the results I found with the different gain settings. So after filming with this camera and just playing with it over the course of 30 days, I think it has a huge market for people that it can work for. It really solves a lot of the problems that we have with DSLRs. It always blew my mind that guys use DSLRs for video during weddings and they're constantly stopping the recording and starting it again and trying to deal with ceremonies. So this camera would solve a lot of those problems. If you are in a really fast-paced shooting environment, I don't know if this is the greatest camera, just because it can be a little finicky to change some of the settings. The touchscreen, I'm sure you could get used to it, but that to me it slowed me down a little bit. And the other thing is the form factor. It's a little bigger, or in size. The weight is about the same as an SLR. Actually, it's really not that much heavier. And I just really enjoyed having a normal form factor video camera for a little while. And when I just want to go out and shoot with a little rig, maybe like this one. This is a Polaroid $60 rig, which I'll be doing a review on before long. It was great. I didn't need to have any kind of loop magnetically attached to my camera or dealing with all kinds of stuff and weights and things. I just threw this on and immediately could start filming, and using the eyepiece with the camera just worked great. So that's something I've started to realize how much I missed, was just a standard normal grip on the side style video camera. Having a record button in ergonomically nice places was really great. So that's another thing with this camera is, it's not an SLR, which some people have really come to love and enjoy using that form factor. But if you are looking to get into more of a video style form factor camera, the Sony VG900 is really going to be a great solution. Be sure to check out DSLRvideoshooter.com for more reviews and tutorials related to DSLR video, filmmaking, and other topics, and I really look forward to seeing you guys over there.
Hey guys, just one more quick thing. I really wanted to thank Will Sullivan for giving me a hand with B-roll downtown. You can check out his website. I'll put a link in the video, and just was really helpful having him around. Great guy. Hope you check out his work, and we'll see you guys next time.